Good morning, everybody. Could Boris Johnson's fate be decided within a matter of a few days? The PM is braced for the publication of that report into Downing Street parties during lockdown, which is expected any day now. Plus, there are claims that Conservative Party whips blackmailed MPs and allegations of Islamophobia within his government. Here's our political correspondent, Rob Powell.
Westminster wakes up to a week that will shape the future of Boris Johnson's premiership. While the publication of the Sue Gray report into alleged government parties during lockdown is not expected today, its arrival later this week will leave a mark on Downing Street, even if the extent of its impact is as yet uncertain.
It's clear that we need a better relationship between Number 10 and the Conservative Parliamentary Party and the Whip's office. It needs to work much better than it has been doing. There's an impression of chaos at Number 10.
It's been reported, but not confirmed, that Dominic Cummings may be interviewed by Sue Gray today. The former Number 10 advisor has accused the Prime Minister of lying about what he knew of alleged parties. His evidence could prove crucial to the inquiry's conclusions. Allies of Boris Johnson believe there may be a way through still if the Sue Gray report leaves a degree of ambiguity over who is responsible for any rule breaking. Rebel MPs also acknowledged that it may take a categorical conclusion that the Prime Minister knew in advance about parties to really trigger a flood of no-confidence letters. But Number 10 is facing other challenges. Tory MP Nusrat Ghani's accusation that she was told she was sacked as a minister because of her Muslim faith, something categorically denied by the government, has led to calls for an independent investigation into both her case and broader allegations within the party.
I think what is needed is an outside independent investigation into the Conservative Party by the Equality and Human Rights Commission, exactly the same way as they investigated Labour Party anti-Semitism.
Boris Johnson's government is still being shaken by the scandals of recent weeks. It's that instability that means many in his party now worry that even if the Prime Minister survives the coming days, the body blows being inflicted may eventually prove too much. Rob Powell, Sky News in Westminster.
So much to talk to the Education Secretary Nadhim Zahawi about this morning. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Let's talk about Nuz Ghani to start with. How offended are you on behalf of your colleague, given what she says she's been through?
Well, Nuz is a valued colleague. I've known her for a very long time. She's worked incredibly hard, both as a minister and as a backbencher. She's made a very serious allegation. It was the Prime Minister spoke to her last night and said that the Cabinet Office will investigate this and look at the detail of this. She put out a statement last night saying, actually, and to be fair to her, that this could be people who weren't even members of the Conservative Party, which is why we have to get to the bottom of this very quickly. And of course, the Chief Whip has come out and named himself as the individual. Now, I work with both colleagues, and I think it's important that someone like a Cabinet Office senior civil servant should look at this properly, because Chief Whip has also categorically denied this. And I think it's important that, well, I'm not going to impugn either colleague. We're one team. We work well together as a team, and that's what the nation expects. And this is of course, and as I say, this is a serious allegation. It takes someone a lot to make such a claim. I think it's important that Nuz is allowed the ability to put her case forward, put the evidence forward to the Cabinet Office.
Why didn't anybody take what she had to say seriously at the time?
I don't think that's true. I think
that's what she feels.
The important thing is that, well, she's also said that she spoke to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister wrote to her, asked her to put forward a formal complaint. She didn't think that was the correct procedure. Now the Cabinet Office can look at this properly and I hope be able to report back swiftly.
When something like this happens, it's the job of the Chief Whip to put their arms around an MP and protect them while there is an inquiry going on, whatever. Given that this allegation is, by all intents and purposes, he's outed himself, against the Chief Whip, what did the Prime Minister offer her instead to protect her during that time?
Well, I think what the Prime Minister's done, and he spoke to Nuz Ghani last night, is to offer her that investigation from the Cabinet Office, which I think when you read her statement...
Why didn't he do that 2 years ago?
Well, he offered her 2 years ago, at the time for her to make a formal complaint and use the party procedure. I think she also went before the Islamophobia inquiry that Professor Singh held for the party. But look, these are really painful allegations for anyone of Nuz's background to make. I think it's important that she gets to be able to put her evidence forward to...
I don't understand why it's a party issue. I mean, if somebody actually said that to her, it's Islamophobic.
Well, as I said, she needs to now be able to put her evidence forward, and I think the right thing to do is to allow the Cabinet Office to investigate.
So you're saying it's her fault that,
no, not at all.
It didn't come to light 2 years ago?
Not at all.
So
not
whose
at all.
fault is it?
Not at all. I think, as I said, I don't have all the details. She's made an allegation which was in the Sunday papers, and then, of course, followed up with a statement. The important thing is that what she's asked for is what the Prime Minister has now spoken to her and is delivering through the Cabinet Office inquiry.
One wonders why it's taken 2 years to get to this position.
Well, as I said, I think what happened 2 years ago...
She was a vulnerable woman. She went to the Prime Minister. She said, this is what's happened to me. I've been sacked because I'm too Muslim, basically. And it's taken 2 years for it to come to light.
Well, and he took it very seriously, and he said to her, look, if she... Absolutely.
Well, this is a Prime Minister who's said that he likened Muslim women to letterboxes and bank robbers.
Well, it's also the Prime Minister that has promoted
Nadhim
Zahawi to Secretary of State of Education, Sajid Javid to Health Secretary, Priti Patel, Rishi Sunak, Kwasi Kwarteng.
That doesn't negate using that
No,
sort
of
of
course
language.
not. Of course, I'm not saying anything other than the important thing to remember is this is a Prime Minister, in my view, who doesn't look at your background, your religion, or anything else. He looks at your ability and whether you are capable of doing a job, and then absolutely makes that decision. At the same time,
what about if you're a woman and you're too Muslim?
Well, again, I was going to say,
it's
and it's the same. It's the Prime Minister who actually asked Professor Singh to conduct an inquiry into Islamophobia. That inquiry came back with some recommendations, which the party's overhauling its systems to make sure we deal with
said about that. I think the findings of this report show clearly that the Conservative Party is institutionally racist.
Well, it made a number of recommendations for the party. It also said that Islamophobia was not widespread in any way in the Conservative Party.
Institutionally racist.
I don't believe that. I've been a member of the party, with all respect to Baroness Vasi or anyone else, I've been a member of the party since the late 80s. I've risen through the party. I've been a local councillor for 3 terms. I've been a volunteer in the voluntary party. I've been a member of Parliament. I have not actually experienced any form of racism.
Two Muslim women are saying that they don't feel that that the party treats women of colour, particularly Muslims, appropriately.
My view is, of course, we can always do better, which is why we had the inquiry, which is why we're overhauling our systems. There is no place, as I said in my tweet over the weekend, for any form of racism or Islamophobia or anti-Semitism in our politics, in our party. I take great pride in the work I'm doing with the education sector at universities in terms of signing up to the international definition of against anti-Semitism, the work we're doing at schools, the work we're doing across government. I think that's important to remember. But in a case where a colleague, a valued colleague, comes forward and says, "Look, I've heard this, or I think there are issues that I want aired and dealt with," it's only right that we then deal with them.
And what should happen to Mark Spencer in the meantime?
Well, I think that Mark Spencer, again, I work very closely with Mark, has categorically denied this and said this is defamatory. So I think it's only right and it's only fair. It's one of our values. You remember when we talked about the Sue Gray report before?
It's taken 5 minutes to get to Sue Gray's name.
No, but it's one of our values of fairness, and people have to have a fair hearing.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to impugn the reputation of either colleague. It's right that the Cabinet Office looks at this now.
OK, William Ragg, let's talk about him, chair of the Standards, deputy chair of the Standards Committee. He is seeing the police today after allegations of threats and blackmail against MPs. Is whipping bullying, or is it bringing MPs into line?
So I've got good experience of this, not because I've been in the Whip's office, quite the contrary. I've been a backbencher for a very long time. It's taken me 11 years to get Secretary of State. I am the definition of it as a marathon, not a sprint in politics. And for 7, 8 years, I was a backbencher. I've rebelled. The whips, and I've never experienced the sort of stuff that William Ragg is describing at all, I can tell you. And many colleagues actually over the weekend came out with a number of articles saying they don't recognise this.
Others did, though.
And I think they have, then a responsibility to put that evidence forward. All I can say to you from my own experience, I haven't experienced any of that, and I've rebelled before, but it hasn't impacted anything to do with my work for my constituency or government decisions. There is due process in government, whether it's the Department of Education or any other department, in how we make decisions.
I'm glad you brought up the Department of Education Secretary, because Christian Wakeford said that he was told by the previous Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson, that if he didn't come into line, then they would remove a school that was promised in his constituency of Bury. Would you, as Education Secretary, have the power to withdraw funding for a school in an MP's constituency?
No, because we have due process in government. That is absolutely not what happens in the way we take decisions in government. So you don't believe Christian Wakeford? No, Christian Wakeford has just crossed the floor and joined the Labour Party.
Doesn't mean he's a liar.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying to you that he's made an allegation against a colleague, Gavin Williamson, clearly doesn't... A
lot of allegations against a lot of colleagues going on at the moment.
No, but all I'm saying to you is Christian Wakeford has chosen to leave the Conservative Party and join the Labour Party. All I would share with your viewers is that the way we conduct ourselves as a Department of Education, we have due process, which we follow. That particular school is getting the funding that it needs. Okay. Nothing has changed. So, there is an inconsistency here in terms of what Christian Wakeford is saying and what the reality is on the ground.
OK. Talk to me about, while we're on schools, you're pledging 9,000 air cleaning units.
We are. So you remember when I came on the programme a few weeks ago, we delivered 350,000 CO2 monitors to schools last year to monitor the air in the classrooms. And the data we got back, which we're publishing our survey on this today, is that actually the bulk, so 95% of classrooms were able to ventilate and keep the air fresh from the data we were getting from our CO2 monitors. That was 25 million investment in CO2 monitors. Then we modelled as to which classrooms we thought may not be able to do that easily, and we thought we're going to need about 8,000 air purifiers. Yeah. We think we're going to need about 9,000 now. And so actually, in terms of being stewards of public money, rather than following what the Labour Party wanted us to do, which is buy 350,000 air purifiers at a massive cost to the Exchequer, we bought 8,000. Actually, last week, we got all the schools to make their allocation, and we got to just over 8,000. So we've gone to 9,000 now. We're delivering air purifiers to help those schools. Okay. It's part of making sure that education remains open. I'm passionate about making sure children remain in school, remain in education. We see all the evidence from the Children Commissioner that that's really important. And that's why we're doing it, including, of course, making sure that teachers get themselves tested twice a week, and, of course, vaccination programme, which we just spoke about. OK, and what is your advice to school heads who still want their kids to wear masks, even though it's not compulsory anymore? So we trust school heads and school leaders to do the right thing. I think they would agree that masks can be a challenge for learning, for communication in the classroom, which is why I wanted them not to last a day longer than necessary. When we saw the data from the scientists that Omicron was plateauing and actually numbers were beginning to drop, and they told us that we've reached the peak, I moved very quickly to say the guidance to wear masks in the classroom can come away last week. The guidance for wearing masks will fall away as part of Plan B this week. That's, I think, the right thing to do. And, of course, I speak to Directors of Public Health who've done a tremendous job working with school heads to make sure that we get this right in localities. If there is an outbreak in a locality, they can reintroduce temporarily masks in communal areas if they wanted to, but they work very closely with us, and it's a strong relationship I have with the front line. I'm very proud of that. See, I didn't ask about Downing Street parties once, but I will be asking later on in the week. What does TL stand for? Tory leader? T levels. I'm going to make them as famous as A-levels. These are technical. They're a fusion between an apprenticeship and an A-level. And actually, they're a fantastic thing, which you're going to hear much more about from me.
Look forward to it. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks a lot, Education Secretary. Thank you. Quick look at what the papers are doing this morning. Daily Telegraph, I should say, says police officers guarding Downing Street have been interviewed by Sue Gray as part of her so-called Partygate investigation. Her report is expected to be published in the coming days in what the Eye describes as a week of reckoning for the Prime Minister. The Times says Boris Johnson is determined to fight on and still doesn't believe he's broken any rules. And The Guardian leads on the PM facing calls to launch an investigation into alleged Islamophobia within the Conservative Party following claims made by the former Minister Nusrat Ghani over the weekend. Meantime, the United States has ordered the families of its embassy staff to leave Ukraine. Russia insists that it has no plans to invade, despite moving 100,000 troops to the border. The US government also warned its citizens against travel to Ukraine because of reports, it said, that Russia is planning significant military action against Ukraine. Late last night, it also warned its citizens against travelling to Russia because of the ongoing tensions with Ukraine, saying there was potential for harassment against US citizens. In the UK, a Foreign Office spokesperson said the safety and security of our staff and British nationals is our top priority. We're keeping the situation under close review. Well, our Europe correspondent Michelle Clifford joins us now from Brussels, where EU foreign ministers are due to meet to discuss the situation. Hi, Michelle. So meeting again today, there's been a lot of talking going on.
A lot of talking, but it's clear that the negotiations, the meetings that occurred last week, the last one on Friday in Geneva, between the Foreign Minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, and Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, did not make the progress that people were hoping for. So the efforts to try and de-escalate around the border with Ukraine continue. As you mentioned, EU foreign ministers are going to be meeting in Brussels today. Antony Blinken will call into that meeting remotely. And there will be tensions at that meeting because there isn't unanimity among EU members about what should happen. And there's going to be particular pressure, I think, on the Germans. Some member states want the Germans to exert leverage on Russia by stopping the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, bringing gas from Russia to Germany and Western Europe. It's something that the Germans feel uncomfortable about because of the gas price situation at the moment, but that clearly will be a big focus. Now, the UK Foreign Secretary Liz Truss is also going to be in Brussels today. She will be meeting the NATO Secretary General this afternoon, but she's actually wearing two hats today, Kay. She has taken over from Lord Frost as the Brexit negotiator, and she will be meeting her counterpart at the European Commission, trying to edge forward on that very thorny issue still of the Northern Ireland Protocol.
OK, Michelle, thank you. More than 200 people have been killed after Islamic State fighters stormed a Syrian prison, sparking a battle which is now going on into a fifth day. Our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle has the latest.
There are two sort of elements of Islamic State that are holding out at the moment. One is a pocket that remains within a section of the prison. They're still holding that despite facing an onslaught from Syrian democratic forces supported by US forces as well, who are in Syria, both on the ground and in the air. So you've still got that element within the prison itself. And then you've got a secondary element, and those are made up of the prisoners who escaped on Thursday during the initial attack, and they have fled out into the surrounding countryside. A lot of them are hiding in houses, and they are taking the fight back to the Syrian democratic forces as well. There was one occasion when they encircled them and they tried to attack them from outside the prison, if you like. So this is really violent stuff. Hundreds dead, mainly the security forces and the IS prisoners, but quite a lot of civilians as well. Many of the civilians we're hearing from our producers in that part of Syria have started fleeing the area because they're worried about being used either as civilian human shields, or they're just worried about being caught up in the fighting. So a lot of them are now seeking refuge either with relatives or some in mosques as well. The very worrying thing about this is that it is the largest attack of its kind by Islamic State since it lost its self-declared caliphate And it would also seem to suggest major intelligence failings by the coalition and by the Kurdish Syrian forces.
Looking at some of today's other headlines for you now on the programme, a man has pleaded guilty to the abduction of a 4-year-old girl from her family's camping tent in Western Australia last year. Cleo Smith was found alone in a house by police 18 days after she was taken. Terence Darrell Kelly faces up to 20 years in prison and will appear in court in March.
Today's guilty plea is confirmation of the excellent policing work and just how strong a case had been presented by Western Australian Police Force. And I'd just like to place on the record again my admiration, respect and thanks to the Western Australian Police Force for the way they handled the Cleo case. It's been extraordinary. That's confirmation they did an outstanding job.
British man who died in Thailand following an alleged assault has been named as Marcus Evans from Weston-super-Mare. Thai police have arrested a 22-year-old man and recovered a sickle, which is believed to have been the murder weapon. Aid is continuing to arrive on the remote island nation of Tonga after large parts were devastated by an underwater volcano eruption and the tsunami which followed. Naval ships from Australia, New Zealand, the UK and Japan have successfully delivered vital supplies despite Tonga's strict COVID-19 border policy. A senior Taliban spokesperson has told Sky News the international community has a moral obligation to recognise the new government in Afghanistan. He defended the new regime and says his administration has a lot of respect for women. But speaking to women and girls in Kabul, our special correspondent Alex Crawford was told of a very different reality.
The Taliban are increasingly intolerant of women's protests about their rights. The latest, a week ago, was broken up by fighters using pepper spray. And they didn't stop there. We've spoken to multiple witnesses who saw the Taliban raiding several homes, including this one, rounding up the female organisers. Tamana Pariani was one. She managed to post this video as the Taliban came looking for her. "Help me, the Taliban are here," she's crying. She and her 3 sisters were taken away by armed men. Witnesses told us they looked like Taliban special forces. The girls haven't been seen since. Others have also been targeted. We got a rare interview with one of the Taliban's most senior spokesmen. He's part of the delegation to Norway this week that'll urge the world to lift sanctions, and he insisted the Taliban valued women.
We have a lot of respect for women. We do not threaten women, ever.
Can I show you a video of a young woman? We pull up Tamana's video with her desperate cries for help.
Yes, I've seen that. I've seen that video.
Quite well known in Afghanistan right now.
That video is, of course, distressing. The Ministry of Interior absolutely rejected it and called the video fake.
How is that fake? If it's fake, where is the
maybe
young woman?
Maybe you can approach the Ministry of Interior and ask them how they came to that conclusion.
But we got no reply from the ministry. Alex Crawford, Sky News, Kabul.
And you can watch Alex's report from Kabul in full throughout the day here on Sky News and also on our mobile app. Looking at the latest coronavirus data for you in the UK, talking to the World Health Organization shortly, 75,000 new cases of COVID-19 reported. 75 more people have died within 28 days of a positive test, bringing that number. Total UK deaths, 153,862. Bosses of the country's largest airlines have written to the government demanding restriction-free travel for those who are fully vaccinated. The government is due to review the rules for England next week. NHS trusts in England lost almost 2 million days in staff absences due to long COVID in the first 18 months of the pandemic. MPs are calling for compensation for workers and for long COVID to be recognised as an occupational disease. Secondary schools in England will each receive £1,000 to help support the COVID vaccination programme. The Department for Education says special schools will be given additional cash based on pupil numbers. The iconic French fashion designer Thierry Mugler, who dressed Beyoncé and Lady Gaga, has died at the age of just 73. The iconic French fashion designer, here he is on the catwalk with some of the models. The announcement was made on his Instagram account. He also designed clothes for David Bowie, Cindy Crawford and Sharon Stone. The singer Diana Ross tweeted a picture of the two of them together, writing, "I will miss you, Thierry Mugler. This was a wonderful time in our lives." Quick look at the weather for you.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Next few days staying largely dry, if rather overcast, but northern Scotland will have some rain. Most places will start cloudy and frost-free, but rain will affect the far north.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Some cool pictures for you now, very cool pictures from Greece. When you think of Greece, you think about sandy beaches and baking sunshine, don't they? They all come to mind, but take a look at this from Mykonos. A polar jet stream has hit southern Greece, leaving the island with rare snowfall and temperatures of -10 degrees. Schools near the capital, Athens, have been shut today and tomorrow, with parts of the nearby island of Evia without security. So that's just one of the images that we've got for you on the programme this morning. What else have we got? Have a quick look at this. Here we go. Here we go. This is the Metro Great Barrier Teeth. The Metro has this shot of a pet fish whose teeth grew so long that she couldn't eat. The 5-year-old porcupine pufferfish, Goldie, received a life-saving emergency operation where her teeth were cut in half. That's quite a smile, isn't it? There you go. The Mirror has this picture of a building conservationist saving Wakefield Cathedral's spire from 247 feet up in the air. It makes me giddy just looking at it. The restoration works on the 500-year-old spire are costing nearly £45,000. Brave person. And the iNewspaper carries a picture of a flying car which has been deemed airworthy by the Slovak Transport Authority. There it is. It's successfully completed more than 200 takeoffs and landings and can reach speeds of up to 118 miles an hour. But don't all rush at once. The vehicle can only carry 2 people at this stage. Bang, bang, chitty, chitty, bang, bang. You have to be of a certain age, I suppose. Do you know who wrote that? Chitty, chitty, bang, bang. Do you? Do you? Are you going to guess? No, you're not going to guess. Ian Fleming. Yes, he did. I know. And inside the Times is a picture from the Federation of International Sports Table Football Open Tournament in Suffolk with a player eyeing up his next move. Now again, everybody, our top stories for you so far this morning. The United States has ordered the families of all embassy staff in Kiev to leave Ukraine amid heightened fears of a Russian invasion. More than 200 people have been killed after Islamic State fighters stormed a Syrian prison, sparking a battle which is now going on into a 5th day. And the Prime Minister has asked the Cabinet Office to investigate allegations of Islamophobia by a Muslim Tory MP. But within the last half hour, the Education Secretary Nadhim Zahawi has told me the claims made by Nusrat Ghani are painful and must be investigated.
This is a serious allegation. It takes someone a lot to make such a claim. I think it's important that Nuz is allowed the ability to put her case forward, put the evidence forward to the Cabinet Office.
Tamara's here with us. My goodness me, just when he thought it can't get any worse, it just has.
Yes, and Downing Street have been incredibly quick to try and close this down. We got a message from them at 7 o'clock, on the dot of 7 o'clock, saying the Prime Minister has asked the Cabinet Office to investigate Nuz Ghani's very serious allegations. She said that when she raised this with the Prime Minister almost 2 years ago, he said, I can't do anything about it, go and talk to the Conservative Party and they'll do an internal investigation. And she wasn't very happy with that outcome because she didn't even know if the people who'd said this about her were indeed Conservatives or exactly how it had come about. Now they've asked the Cabinet Secretary to investigate after the Prime Minister spoke to her last night. We haven't heard back from her yet, but one assumes that he ran the idea past her. And Nadhim Zahawi said he hopes that this investigation comes back very swiftly. I think what's been interesting about how all this has played out, Kay, obviously in the most dangerous week for the Prime Minister personally that this has come out, is that you've seen two Cabinet Ministers, Nadhim Zahawi and Sajid Javid, come out very quickly as soon as she spoke out in the Sunday Times and said this must be investigated fully, where the government's official line is, oh, we gave her the chance to ask the Conservative Party for an inquiry. So Downing Street have moved very quickly, but it just shows that when the government is as unstable as it is at the moment, this whole state of waiting for Sue Gray, little fires start popping up everywhere and it becomes very difficult to put them out.
Great idea for a title for a series, that. Thanks very much. We'll see you at tomorrow's Take at 9 o'clock. Thank you. Chair of the Labour Muslim Network, Afzal Khan, wrote to the Conservative Party chair, Oliver Dowden, in October to demand the government did much more to protect British Muslims. Let's speak to them now. Hello to you. Thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. What are you making about what we've been reading in the Sunday Times and indeed what a couple of ministers have been saying to us today?
Well, I've been struggling, I suppose, for a number of years in what has been happening. And in those few years, I've written to almost half a dozen times to different people, people who have been leading the Conservative Party, different ministers, to the Prime Minister. And I felt, they've never taken it seriously. With Nusrat Ghani situation, I must say I am saddened. But I'm not surprised in light of the whole history that we have here.
How do you feel as a Muslim today? Do you feel that the Labour Party is more welcoming? I mean, they have had their own criticism as far as allegations of Islamophobia are concerned.
Okay, you're absolutely right, they have. And I'm the chair of Labour Muslim Network. We produced a report which did highlight that there are issues within the Labour Party. But what I must point out is actually not that there isn't a problem in the society or in the Labour Party or any other political party. The real, I think, issue here is the difference in how the leadership responds to it. When we produced that report, the leadership in the Labour Party accepted it and then acted on it. And the difference we have in the Conservative Party is that all that evidence similarly has been given, which highlights actually there is far greater problem in the Conservative Party, but they are still in state of denial. And that is what is concerning. And I think the reason for that, I would say to you, is all leads from the top. Because Boris himself have said things about different communities which are just not acceptable, including Muslim women. And when he made that comment of a letterbox, comparing the Muslim women too, there was a spike of 375% of this hate against the Muslim woman. So I think because of that culture, which is the real issue, and I think I welcome the inquiry that he has done. Again, you can see how late he has been. He was directly asked by Nusrat herself, and here we are 2 years later that now he's decided to do that. But there's a wider problem in the Conservative Party, and that requires, I would say, a wider independent inquiry. And I think the Quality Commission probably should be now seriously looking at investigating the Conservative Party.
And should the Chief Whip step back while any investigation is carried out by the Cabinet Office?
Look, Cabinet Office will do that. I just hope that they deal with this part quickly. But I think the wider issue is the party as a whole, and that really needs to be looked at.
But what do you think should happen to the Chief Whip in the meantime?
Well, I mean, look, it's a matter for him and the party or the Prime Minister, I would say. He needs to take assessment. Clearly, there's a conflict here. Nusrat is saying that there has been this discussion and he's totally denying it. Now, if he feels he can still carry on, it's a matter for him. I mean, if I was in his shoes, I would step back.
OK. Good to talk to you. Thank you for joining us on the programme this morning. Joining us now, Dominic Grieve, former Attorney General for England and Wales. Hello to you. Thanks for joining us on the programme.
Morning.
How has your former party found itself in this position?
Because it's taken the view that as it's been open to Muslims to come in at the highest levels, it has failed to note the existence of Islamophobia at other levels of the party. I chaired a commission for Citizens UK in 2017 on Muslim participation in public life, and what the deterrents were to Muslims participating in public life. And I have absolutely no doubt from that commission that Islamophobia was one of the reasons why many Muslims didn't feel able to step up and do more within the wider community. And it's a serious problem. And I think the comment that was just made about Boris Johnson's casual mockery of Muslim women was a very telling example. Indeed, at the time he did it, I remember saying that I hoped very much he would never become leader of the Conservative Party because I would be leaving it. And I think that's turned out to be fairly prescient, actually.
Given what he said about Muslim women, which, by any measure was despicable, how difficult can it be for women like the former minister, junior minister, going to see him to say, this has happened to me, and then her being, as she says, dismissed?
It's very difficult for me to make a judgment on that. My experience when I was in Parliament was that Muslims in the parliamentary party were welcomed. And indeed, Nusrat was a very valued colleague. So what exactly went on around this episode in which she lost office, very, very difficult to make a judgment, and I would be reluctant to do so. But I do understand very clearly her concerns about feeling marginalised because she was a Muslim woman who was expressing, I think this was the key thing, she was expressing her Muslimness. I think that is the issue. Question whether she was in fact explaining that she had Muslim beliefs and values which might have been at variance with other people's.
Yeah, I mean, what does it even mean, Muslimness? I don't know. As far as...
I think I can answer that question up to a point. It's a difficult question to answer, but I think it's about whether... It applies also to people of other faiths. It's about whether in your life you are expressing your faith in the way you are conducting yourself. And I think that's how I would interpret it and how I would interpret the problem that she may have had.
And we're a reasonable and liberal democracy
that
should embrace all of that, shouldn't we?
Well, of course we should, because we live in a pluralist society. There are people from many faiths and none in our background, and we have to be tolerant and accepting and also look at the contributions which people can make in our wider society. And if we're to prosper for the future, that is absolutely essential.
Just want to ask you what's going on with Sue Gray, and we believe that she's speaking to Dominic Cummings today. One wonders why we cherry pick on what we believe from Dominic Cummings. Sometimes we believe him, sometimes we don't. Do you believe what he's been saying about the parties?
I would always take anything that Mr. Cummings says with a pinch of salt, because after all, I've been the recipient of smear campaigns which came out of number 10 Downing Street when Mr. Cummings was in charge of the operation. So I'm always very dubious about what he has to say, but it's clear he also has a desire of vengeance against Mr. Johnson. And as a result, he's spilling the beans on things which he saw as taking place within number 10 Downing Street, which he thought were unacceptable. So it's not so much what he has to say, it's the corroborating evidence, which seems to me to be the key in all this. And on the question of parties in number 10, it's abundantly clear that he was right about that, because parties did take place in number 10 Downing Street, despite the Prime Minister's earlier denials that any such thing had happened.
It does look as though the Prime Minister is literally hanging on by his fingertips, but, he is the comeback king. If it's not him, then who would you like to support as Prime Minister of the Conservative Party going forward?
I don't think I have a view, because I'm not in the House of Commons.
Of course you do. Of course you do.
I would like to see somebody who brings back what I would describe as pragmatic, unideological conservatism. That doesn't mean to say you don't do some quite radical things, but you look at what the interests of the United Kingdom are, and you provide leadership where you can show integrity. If there is no integrity in leadership, then the ability ultimately of leaders to lead in taking difficult decisions becomes very difficult. Mrs. Thatcher had integrity. She took radical decisions which people disagreed with, but she was able to provide that leadership. The present Prime Minister cannot provide that leadership because he is mired in his own dishonesty. And
Maybe
that
we need
really
a
does
Muslim
bother
Prime
me
Minister.
more than anything else.
Maybe we need a Muslim Prime Minister. What do you think?
I don't think the question of whether we have a Muslim prime minister or not is really relevant. Many Muslims have great integrity. Many Christians have great integrity. Many people with no religious faith have integrity. So as far as I'm concerned, I would like to see the Conservative Party under the leadership of somebody where I know I can respect and trust. And there are plenty of such people around. And it would be a great pleasure for me to be able to start supporting the Conservative Party again when such a person arrives.
OK, I'll be more obvious. Maybe somebody like, I don't know, maybe somebody like Rishi Sunak or perhaps Nadhim Zahawi or perhaps Sajid Javid.
All those people are potential candidates, it seems to me, for the leadership of the party. And all of them, it's not just a single pebble on the beach, might well be able to do the job very well. There are also some people who are not in cabinet at all, who might be very good at leading the Conservative Party and leading the country. So that's why I'm not prescriptive on this. What I am quite clear about in my own mind is that the present incumbent of Downing Street, Mr. Johnson, is completely unfit for office. And the question this week is, are Conservative MPs going to have the courage to stand up for the values which I think most of them have and say, time's up?
OK, good to talk to you. Thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Hello again, everybody. COVID restrictions are easing across the UK this week, and it seems the World Health Organization is cautiously optimistic that the virus could be on its way out in Europe. Let's talk about it with Dr. David Nabarro. Hi, Doctor. It's good to talk to you. Is the end in sight in Europe for COVID? Oh, can't hear you at the moment, Doctor. Are you muted at all?
Thank you very much.
There we go.
The end is in sight, but how long is it going to take to get there? And what sort of difficulties will we face on the way? Those are the questions that none of us can answer, because this virus continues to give us challenges and surprises. So I do want everybody who's watching this morning to your great programme to do one thing, and that is to go on treating this virus with respect. It's not changed. It's absolutely not suddenly become a soft thing. It is still very serious. And so for me, if the end is in sight, that's good news. But it's as though we're just passing the halfway mark on a marathon, and we can see that, yes, there is an end and the fast runners are getting through ahead of us, but we've still got a long, long way to trudge, and it's going to be tough.
As far as our own Health Secretary is concerned, Sajid Javid says that we need to treat COVID like we treat the flu. Do you agree?
Oh, well, I mean, again, I keep wondering what the people who make these amazing predictions know that I and my colleagues in the World Health Organization don't know. You see, what people are seeing from around the world and reporting to the WHO is this is still a very, very dangerous virus, especially for people who've not been vaccinated and who've not been exposed to it before. It also can mutate and form variants, and we've seen several, but we know there are more not far away. So quite honestly, we are not saying that this should be considered to be like flu or indeed like anything else. It's a new virus, and we must go on treating it as though it is full of surprises, very nasty and rather cunning.
And what do you make of the suggestions by our Prime Minister that most of the restrictions that have been in place under Plan B should be lifted by next week?
Well, restrictions are put in place by governments in order to help people make the choices that will keep them healthy. They're not put there to work against what people need to do. After all, the virus is the problem and people are the solution. But people need governments to help them. Now, governments have to be consistent and clear and not be shifting their position. And all governments everywhere should not suggest to people that the data have suddenly changed or the virus has suddenly got incredibly weak. No. Governments have got to set the direction and not shy away from that. So all I'm asking every leader in the world to do is to help everybody stay focused on the job, which is keeping this virus at bay, preventing people from getting infected if at all possible, and making certain that we are well prepared to deal with further surges as they come.
OK, good to talk to you, as always. Hope the grandchildren are well. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Great. I'm glad to hear it. Thank you. I want to show you these pictures. Have a look. World record sets at an ice hockey match. I love this, in Pennsylvania. They lob all the teddy bears onto the ring. They do this because all of these teddy bears go to homeless children or children that are living in shelters. The Hershey Bears team held their annual teddy bear toss to raise money for the charity, and this time collected 52,341 bears and stuffed animals, smashing their previous world record. That great big teddy bear lobbing it over the top. Money raised will go to youth and disability charities as well in the state, which is absolutely fantastic.